I was asked to talk about Greek financial transparency and political stability. I don't have a PowerPoint for two reasons, because since I started talking to Jake, he's changed the subject on me 3 times. So I went back to the room last night and kind of dealt with the latest subject. Now, I also want to pick up, Ari and I talked a little bit before, and this is actually going to be very well coordinated, because you are the world's experts on accounting. There's even a random economist here, with all due respect to the derogatory comments about one or two political scientists, of which I used to be one. But I've learned a real lot, genuinely, and I thank you for that. I've learned just a tremendous amount about the system and how it should work. What I'd like to talk about is the other end of the equation, which Ari started, I think, on a very optimistic note, and I don't disagree with anything he said. But the other end of the equation is the people you're dealing with. You can have a wonderful equation. You can have a wonderful outcome, a wonderful formula, but I think it's very important to keep in mind the people you're dealing with. And I'm not going to talk about all the players. I spent, in my 30-year diplomatic career, I spent 3 tours in Greece, a total of 9 years. And I don't claim to have any kind of expertise. I have a few impressions that started in the early to mid-'80s and concluded when I still go back there pretty frequently. So I was asked to talk about financial transparency and political stability. And every single person in this room would agree, and many of the presenters have made arguments that the greater transparency you have, the more political stability you have. No doubt about it, no question, no debate. If you presented that to a Greek prime minister today, to a Greek political leader, and he was being honest with you, and I say he because there hasn't been a she yet, they would kind of say to you, well, yeah, that's right in theory, but I got to worry about tomorrow. And, transparency to many of the political leadership in Greece, and this goes across administrations and all, is perceived in many ways as the enemy. You won't get them to tell you that, but where's Dag? He was here. He was talking. Okay. He was talking earlier about the difficulty of privatization in Greece. There's a reason. It's not just that they're difficult people. They're very, very nice people. But there's a reason why it's so hard, why Paul spends months at a time in Greece trying to get basic facts and figures out of these guys. And I honestly can't answer, do they have it? I don't know. But I can tell you it's very, very difficult. So what I'd like to talk about, share with you, are my perspectives on what goes through the Greek leadership's mind when people like you, many of you, the world's experts, come and talk to them and kind of try to convince them of many of the logical arguments that have been made in this room today. First point is, right now, Alexis Tsipras, the prime minister, I don't think he gets up every morning and focuses on the Greek economy. I think he focuses, as several people have mentioned, on the refugee situation. I think he focuses on a lot of things, and I'll get into some of these things in a second. It's not that he's ignoring the economy, but I think the refugee situation is a lot more serious on a day-to-day basis. You can have a perfectly logical message, but without understanding what's going on in his world, that message can be totally lost, ignored, shunted aside, what have you. And I'll just use an example from our own history. August of 1973 was a very consequential period in our history in Vietnam. Very, very consequential. And if you do any reading of the history, and I remember living through this, you saw that we had a totally dysfunctional White House, because that's when Nixon resigned over Whitewater. This was the United States. And we were also obviously dysfunctional around the world. Closer to home, the Cypriots blame us for the Turkish invasion a little bit later. We had a totally dysfunctional White House when this was happening. And it doesn't, I'm not making excuses, I'm just saying, understand, walk in the other guy's shoes. Now let me just say a word about the refugee crisis. Y'all, the last time you focused on it probably was you saw there was an agreement. It's over, it's finished. No. The agreement was basically, they start sending back refugees, and for everyone they send back, they'll take one out of the camps. But that leaves Greece with 50,000 refugees. No one made any provision for them. 50,000 refugees in a nation of 12 million. And you're talking about setting up a lot of camps for the indefinite future. These are people there's no decision on. Stay with the refugees for just a second, because I just, again, want to get inside the Greek leadership's heads. So when you're talking to them about privatization, or you're talking to them about debt relief, or the Troika's having a meeting, there's just a lot going on. Two of the Paris attackers came through Turkey to Greece. I'm not saying that everyone, who's a refugee, but, it was done once, it could be done again. Greece, I don't think, is a specific target of ISIS, but it's an easy target. The UK and France and Germany are more logical targets, but it would be a target of convenience. Greece has got very porous borders. Little question, what country has the longest border in all of Europe? Actually, what country's borders are longer than all the combined borders of the rest of Europe? Greece, when you look at all the islands. So there's plenty of ways to get into Greece. Its intelligence and law enforcement efforts don't nearly compare to the efforts of many of your governments. It's very easy to blend in Greece. And Greece has very, very tight budgets right now. And so it's very, very difficult to spend the resources to try to deal with this massive influx. And I'm halfway, he said. Okay, I'm more than halfway. You've also got a phenomenon called Golden Dawn. Many of your countries have this right-wing, neo-Nazi, reactionary thing, and Greece has got the same. A very anti-immigrant group, often taking to the streets, often being violent. The leadership's in jail or has been in jail before. That's something else they've got to worry about. Why does this matter to you? Because it doesn't take much to spark a demonstration in Greece. When you have demonstrations, tourism stops. Tourism stops, the economy collapses, because this is the largest earner. So it does matter. Now, in the meantime, Greece still spends, there's only 3 countries in NATO that spend more than 3% of their budgets on defense: the US, Turkey, and Greece. The problem with this is that the main threat, what Greece is spending billions of euros on, isn't the immigration, a threat from immigrants or ISIS or anything else, ISIS infiltration. It's on a perceived threat that goes back umpteen decades that Turkey is the main enemy. So they're buying all kinds of defense equipment for a war with Turkey that's never going to happen. And when you talk about scarce heroes, this is a prime example of a misallocation of resources. Why, again, does this matter? For the first time ever, and I never thought I would hear this, people are talking about Schengen. They're talking about, well, maybe we should have Schengen minus. And the talk is directed toward Greece. A lot of Europeans are concerned about Greece's porous borders. And if something happens on Schengen, which I don't think will, but I never thought there would be talk, then all bets are off. So when Tsipras wakes up in the morning, he's got 153 deputies. He needs 151 to govern. That's not a big margin, okay? He has to worry about refugees. He has to worry about all kinds of other things, Schengen, what have you. It was mentioned earlier that the problems in Greece are not primarily economic, but they're cultural and political and fundamentally systemic, and I couldn't agree with that more. It doesn't mean there's not economic problems, but a couple of your colleagues, of our colleagues, mentioned this. George Serafin, among others, said this. And I think before you're going to get any reform, you've got to go after some of these cultural, systemic issues that are very, very deep-seated, that come from a perception among many in Greece that the problems are there because of outsiders. I felt this for the 30 years off and on that I was in Greece because it was usually the Americans. It's not us anymore, guys, it's you, you know. It was the Turks, you know, and this is something that's deeply held. It goes across political lines. It was also mentioned before that there are some really, really fundamental issues out there that are well beyond Greece's control. What happens if there's one incident and the tourist season goes kaput? And it's right now that this kind of stuff would happen. There goes the economy. The ability of Greece to kind of work its way out of this problem, I really have some concerns about. I have some fundamental questions. Outside of tourism and some specialty agriculture, manufacturing, when I was there in the 80s, they did have manufacturing. That all went north. That's gone, you know. People talk about a services sector, possibly, but not a lot of money. A logistics center, possibly with the Chinese having taken control of the port of Piraeus, but again, not a big earner. The big earner could be shipping, but a deal was made with the colonels during the junta because all the big shippers, Onassis, Niarchos, what have you, they threatened to leave Greece. And so a deal was made that they wouldn't tax shipping, and that's impossible to come back on. So at the end of the day, if you're any of the major players, if you're Alexis Tsipras, your main thing is stay in office. The first job of any politician. Your second thing is take care of the poor, which is why he fights so tenaciously on pensions and civil service. If you're the opposition, your main goal is win an election, protect your constituencies, which include the wealthy, of which there is, as we all know, there's been a tremendous amount of capital flight. You're the bureaucracy, you're going to resist any of this change. You're going to say yes. As Paul, as I've mentioned to you any number of times, they're going to say yes to you, and they're just not going to do it. And they're not going to do it only because they're a bureaucracy and bureaucracies are resistant to change. They're not going to do it because the change hurts them. When you talk about corruption, it goes all the way through the system. You're the wealthy, you're going to resist this, and if it gets bad enough, you're going to become a tax citizen in the UK. So I don't want to close on such a pessimistic note, but I do, and I think what Ari had a bit more of a positive note, which I agree with, but I do want to share with you, this is a perspective that I see, that with all of your brilliant, and I really do mean this, thinking, and I've learned a tremendous amount, this is a tough nut to crack. This is not going to be easy, and this is going to take a lot of time. Thank you very much.
dinner where we